This is St. Louis on the Air from St. Louis Public Radio. I'm Elaine Cha. St. Louis finds itself at the top of the list of most dangerous cities in America. While a report out of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department and the mayor's office earlier this year showed a decrease in homicides, many families continue to grapple with grief over the loss of loved ones to violence and have little to no support to begin to heal. Cheeraz Gormon is a St. Louis artist who unfortunately knows this experience firsthand. Along with making art, she founded the Sibling Support Network to help those who've lost loved ones to violent crime. And she joins us in studio. Cheeraz, welcome back to St. Louis on the Air.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you lost your brother, John, to violence 11 years ago. And before we proceed, I want to thank you for being here to talk about this and to share my condolences for that loss. Now, what is it, Cheeraz, that we should know about John and the kind of bond you shared?
I always called John my young big brother. We are 8 years apart. I'm 8 years his senior. Mm-hmm. But he was wise beyond his years. He had a way of being able to observe me. And I'll never forget that he would remind me to enjoy life, because I still have a tendency to kind of go from one thing to the next without stopping and enjoying and or celebrating. So I think for me, one of the things that I would like people to know about him is that he loved life. He really had an intuition about him where he took care of his friends as well as his family just by being so tapped in to what someone's needs were or what the energy was, around him. He had this ability to kind of sense when things were a little off and being able to shift.
Yeah. So to lose a sibling with whom you had such a singular relationship, what is it that you were offered, Cheeraz, at the time he was killed in order to support you in your grieving?
I will have to say that outside of my parents and my close family and friends, there was nothing that I could find for myself as specifically as someone who lost my sibling to a violent crime.
And did you seek something out and not find anything?
Yes. So I had to learn that certain grief groups have a hierarchy. And when you enter those spaces, if you are a parent or a spouse or the child of the deceased, there seems to have been more attention placed. And I'll never forget, because one of the things that made such an indelible mark on me early on was that people would ask me, like, how are you doing? And before I could even really express how I was doing, they would be like, well, how's your mom doing? How's your dad doing? How's his girlfriend? And it was kind of this narrowing and flattening of my experience to the point where I even started to question myself if I had the right to grieve as deeply as I was grieving.
What was it? I mean, and maybe the answer to this is quite obvious, but what was it about looking for something or someone outside your immediate family or those close friends that was so necessary to deal with this very particular loss?
I needed someone to understand how hard it was to have someone taken away violently, instantly, that you have known their entire life. It's like I had to had to really sit with what it meant to lose my brother outside of people having stock responses for me. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that, it's everything's going to be okay. Give it time. Thank God nobody said to me like, oh, he's in a better place. Like,
okay.
Thankfully nobody attached, that particular thing, since it was, a violent crime that took his life, specifically gun violence.
Yeah.
So I just needed somebody to understand me as a big sister, and I did not want my family just to be the container for that, or my close friends to be the container for that.
So the Sibling Support Network, as we're talking about, was founded in 2015, launched in 2017, out of necessity. And what you've mentioned about losing someone to violence, that can compound and complicate grief over a loved one's death. In what ways did you personally experience that, Cheeraz?
Thankfully, the young man who took my brother's life was apprehended. Mm-hmm. My brother's life was taken in a domestic violence situation where a young woman was basically being stalked by her ex. And she did what I think any of us would do. She called her friends over when she got word that he was actually in the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And, the young man broke into the home and he shot everybody he could. And that's how I lost my brother. Mm-hmm. So since she survived, they were able to locate him and apprehend him. And thankfully, we had a trial. We had a delay of trial, which adds a whole other layer of pain and hurt, because when you're prepping for a trial where homicide is involved, you meet with the prosecuting attorney, you go over the case, they talk about all the evidence. Our family elected not to see the autopsy pictures. We even requested not to be in the room during the time that the medical examiner was presenting the evidence. And the delay of trial, just the body prepping itself for that type of energy, because when you're going through a trial, you have to stay poised and composed. You're in the room with the person. So that had me operating on so many different levels, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And then when we had the delay of trial, it's like my body had prepped itself, like prepared itself for all of this. And then it was just like, oh my God, now we have to wait. I think we had to wait about 2 or 3 more months. And then going through the actual trial, hearing all the testimony, hearing the different phone calls over the years that this young woman made. So for me, my experience of grief was actually compounded because I had to prep my mind and body and spirit to be prepared for this trial. We get a delay. We actually have the trial. I'm in the room with this young man, and all of this evidence is being presented. And it was somewhat of an out-of-body experience for me. And sadly enough, I did get exposed to a picture of my brother.
And so where was the support for you coming at this time? Because this is something that you were experiencing with your family by their side, but you were also going through this alone as a sibling. Where was that support coming from?
My mom is kind of a genius. My mother actually came to me the night before we went to trial. And she said, I want you to get on Facebook and I want you to write about this. I want you to write about what we are going through and what we are experiencing. And I say that that was a very genius move by my mother because I'm a writer.
Mm-hmm.
She knew that that was going to help me on a mental and an emotional level process, as well as, just kind of getting the story out. But I give her all the credit in the world for allowing me to tap into a tool that I have to help myself.
Yeah.
However, at that time, I will definitely say that I was a bit insular. I really leaned into close family and friends.
Mm-hmm. We're speaking with Cheeraz Gormon, a St. Louis artist and founder of the Sibling Support Network. The Sibling Support Network was started, 2015 and launched officially in 2017. Now, since you have started the network, it has grown over time. And one of the things that you've done with all this that you have experienced, some of the support that you needed that you did not get yourself, you've been meeting other people. And part of that is through tabling at the Central Library in downtown St. Louis. What is it that happens at those tablings? I mean, I would imagine that the discussions of grief in a public place like those can be very heavy.
Yes, and I'm very grateful for what the tabling events have brought. Because, yes, people will come up, they'll read the sign that says Sibling Support Network, and they'll read, the line that says support for people who have lost either blood-related or fictive kin siblings to a violent crime, and they pause.
Mm-hmm.
And the usual reaction is that people will look at me and they'll be like, is this your organization? And I'm like, yes. And then they'll just kind of look at the table and then they'll ask me about my personal experience. And I'm very transparent with them about that. And then it allows other people to open up, even though I will definitely say, because we don't turn anybody away. I say all grief is welcomed. I've been exposed to experiences where people have shared with me needing resources around the fact that they were incarcerated when they lost their sibling or when they lost a parent and that they were not released to attend the funeral and things like that. So tabling also has opened my eyes to other needs that are out here in the community for people who are grieving deeply.
You mentioned, Cheeraz, that fictive kin is also part of whom you're talking with. Fictive kin is another way to describe chosen family or a play cousin. It's basically people you don't share DNA with, but you effectively function as family. Why was it so important to include fictive kin in this Sibling Support Network group?
It was important for me to include fictive kinship because I saw and I see to this day how the 4 young men who were close to my brother, who were like my little brothers, I see how they were impacted and still are impacted. And they were around him every day.
Right.
And I value that relationship and I honor that relationship. And I feel that they need the same care and concern and support that I need, if not more so.
So along with the tabling, meetups are also something that is part of what the network does. You have monthly meetups that are organized specifically for those who are mourning blood-related siblings, fictive kin siblings, and trans siblings. So having spaces that are dedicated for each of these groups instead of one that just encompasses all of them, why is that so vital?
Because the relationships are different. Sadly enough, it was from experience that I decided to break the groups up where people started to question the folks who were fictive kin, right? On whether if they had the right, which was wild, to grieve as deeply as the blood family, right? And then also when it comes to trans and non-binary folk, people are just mean.
Oh.
You know, even when you have lost a loved one, some people just lack decorum and humanity. So I wanted to make sure that I provided a safe space for people who have lost their trans and non-binary siblings so they don't have to explain to somebody else about their deceased loved one and or defend them.
Right, right. The participants in these meetup groups, or those who approach the table to talk with you, what else are they offered as far as avenues for being in community, either with one another or to get what they need?
So we have a few different offerings during what we call our support days. So I have these walking labyrinths that are placed on the floor. So if people just want to come in and do a walking meditation, they can. I'm also supported by the Community Chaplaincy Project under Reverend Gabrielle Kennedy. So we do have it available where people can speak to a chaplain if they would like to. And we welcome all people. We are not of one particular faith or spiritual practice. And then also there are just different materials that we have where sometimes I will go one-on-one with people about the Mourner's Bill of Rights or the 5 stages of grief. We also have finger labyrinths available if people want to do like a meditation with their fingers with the finger labyrinths. And we also go through an exercise called the feeling wheel, where, say, for instance, if somebody comes in and they say that they're sad, and it's like, okay, let's dig a little deeper. And we actually have a like handout that is a wheel with all the different emotions. So it helps somebody, you know, it helps a person to articulate what they are actually feeling so we can really get down to what they're feeling, how they're feeling, and what needs may be attached to that. And also, when people come to the groups, I'm a community health worker as well as a chaplain. However, I just try and stick to like one thing. And during the groups, I make sure that I stick to my proficiency as a community health worker. So if someone has a need in relationship to housing or becoming food secure or needing assistance with, you know, a utility bill, I make sure that I do a warm handoff to an organization here in St. Louis who will support, or if they need longer term care, then I make referrals to organizations like the Village Path if they are a person who identifies as a Black male and they just need additional support. And that is a great group where they even have a fund called the Little Black Boy Fund that can help Black men get into therapy for up to 5 sessions for free. So I make sure the name was very intentional. So Sibling Support Network is truly a network.
So before we move on, I mean, the Mourner's Bill of Rights, I've not heard of that. What is that, Cheeraz?
So the Mourner's Bill of Rights is a document, and I'm totally blanking on the author of it. I'm so sorry. But the Mourner's Bill of Rights literally is a Bill of Rights for those of us who grieve and mourn to remind us what we have rights to. You know, one of my favorite, you know, rights on that is that, no, you have the ability to experience, you have the right to experience grief burst, right? And a grief burst, I'll just use myself as an example. I remember seeing a young man. I was on the bus one day, and I remember seeing a young man that favored my brother. And I just broke down crying. Sometimes I'll hear a song that will remind me of him, and I'll just burst into tears. That is what is called a grief burst. And it's where we're not managing our emotions to make other people comfortable. So it's about 10 rights on the Mourner's Bill of Rights that reminds us that we actually have the ability to we have a right to experience our full humanity and what that may look like while we're grieving and mourning.
Now, Aid the Block is a training program that's part of your work, lots of different work. Tell us, Cheeraz, how Aid the Block is related to what the Sibling Support Network does, or maybe more aptly, what it offers.
Yes, so Aid the Block is one of our authors. I'm super happy that we finally have this off the ground because Aid the Block seeks to train 2 to 5 households in the city of St. Louis, the Metro East area, as well as the surrounding counties in adult and or youth mental health first aid. So mental health first aid is a modality that came to the United States from Australia, where it teaches participants how to recognize the signs and symptoms of a mental health challenge and or crisis, and how to properly assist someone in those moments, and to make sure that you know the proper steps on how to get them the appropriate professional care. Say that 5 times. And I felt that it was great for me to go through mental health first aid. I will definitely say I found support for myself through going through a mental health first aid training to become a mental health first aider, because I started to see certain changes in my behavior that were associated with how I was grieving and mourning the loss of my brother. I've been very transparent about the fact that I almost became a cutter, after my brother passed away. Right. And once again, the genius of my mother saying to me, when I admitted to her, that I thought about cutting myself, she was like, that won't let the pain out.
Right.
And I happened upon a mental health first aid class at the time. It was being taught by BHR, Behavioral Health Response. And I went and became an aider, and there was so much information in there that I wish the folks around me would have been equipped with when I was in what I called my crumbling stage after my brother was killed. So I wanted to make sure that Sibling Support Network offered adult and mental health first aid, because we need a front line in our community. We need to be equipped with this information.
In the last 30 or so seconds, Cheeraz, what would you say to a person who's grieving a sibling loss to violence and isn't sure whether something like the support network will help?
To a person who is grieving the loss of your blood-related or fictive kin sibling to a violent crime, I would definitely say it is okay to let people know how you feel. You don't have to hold it in, and you don't have to, quote unquote, hold it together. There are people around you who you don't know, who love and care about you, who will help you hold it.
Cheeraz Gormon is the founder of the Sibling Support Network. You can find more information about the network by visiting our website. That's stlpr.org. Thank you so much, Cheeraz.
Thank you.
This episode was produced by Maya Norfleet.
Our audio engineer is Aaron Dorr. This podcast was mixed and edited by Aaron.
Our executive producer is Alex Hoyer.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here.
Do you find yourself regularly listening to episodes of St. Louis on the Air? Suggest us to a friend you think might enjoy our conversations, and leave us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the simplest way to help people discover our show. Thank you.
St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri St. Louis.
The Gateway brings you the day's news each weekday from around the St. Louis region and the state capitals in Jefferson City.
Our schools are accredited. We don't need this bill.
And Springfield.
How many more years must pass before lawmakers see time is of the essence?
I'm Abby Larico. Join me each weekday for The Gateway on the STLPR app or wherever you get podcasts.